Hey, welcome to Radical Books and Activists. We have the distinguished pleasure of having Dr. Howard Airman and Yanir Bar Yam. Let me know if I'm butchering your name. And they are here to talk about the myths and the facts about COVID. As you know, I've been a long-time activist fighting COVID in Chicago and elsewhere, and Howard much longer than that, and Yanir as well. So, Howard, why don't we start with you? Why don't you introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Dr. Howard Airman. I live here in the Little Village neighborhood of Chicago, and I am from the South Side of Chicago. Very happy to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
Hey,
I'm the former Assistant Health Commissioner of the City of Chicago for about 7 years, and I was on the faculty at the University of Illinois at Chicago for about 38 years.
Right, we have the viewers. Welcome, viewers. And Yanir, to tell us about yourself.
So I'm a physicist and complexity scientist, and I have been working on pandemics for 16, 17 years. And I worked on Ebola in West Africa and other things because we worked on both the math, but the math pointed at the importance of community efforts. And so we've been working on community efforts. And I'm one of the co-founders of the World Health Network.
Oh, fantastic! I didn't know that. So you feel free to speak about your organizations, and we'll uplift those in the comments so people can know how to contact you. So I gotta tell you what, I think a lot of people were shocked, and I run into people like this in Chicago: educators, teachers, students. Fauci basically saying that we're going to live with COVID from now on. It's no longer a pandemic. And so, what do you think about that? Well, first of all, let's talk about what you think about COVID in general as it is, but maybe a response to this recent. Oh, wait a second. Okay, Kathy's coming on the way. Well, what do you think? What were your thoughts? I heard your thoughts, Howard, and I had this. My response was initially liar. Immediately started posting, tweeting back. I'm very opinionated, as you can imagine. But what was Yanir, let's start with you. What did you think about Fauci's claims that, we're fine, let's move forward?
So we have a very basic problem with confusing language and what's going on, right? Because people are using, a pandemic is the presence of a disease that's found globally. People want to now talk about it. Many people have now started to use the word endemic. Endemic just means that it's widespread, and they're not really contradicting each other as if they're different. So we have a problem of terminology. People think that endemic means it's going to become less severe, milder, or something. But there are a lot of endemic diseases that we've had that have been very severe. So the question is, how do we avoid using language in a way that sort of implies something where it doesn't really imply that at all?
Right.
And also, and the fact that you have an endemic disease doesn't mean you can't get rid of it. We've eliminated endemic diseases. That's one of the things that we've been doing for 100 years or whatever more. And we do that by taking action to prevent transmission. And there are various ways to do that. So even if we call it endemic, it doesn't mean that we shouldn't fight it. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't protect ourselves from it. So what's confusing is that people are using words in incorrect ways to imply things that they don't mean. Because the idea is that if this disease fits into a category of diseases, that somehow it has the properties of those other ones. And that just doesn't follow.
Right.
So this is a confusion of language and science that hasn't been helping us a lot.
Right. And I would say, Yanir, it's confusing by design.
Absolutely.
And that's one of the problems that is so. Oh my gosh, I have so many opinions. I'm trying really hard not to cuss. But Howard, what do you think about what's happening, not just in the U.S., but thanks to the World Health Network, and you can speak again to this. I mean, it's not just the United States that has been incredibly, I say criminal, I call it genocide, incredibly irresponsible. We're seeing motions like this in other parts of the world where they're saying, oh, you're fine, you know, you don't need to get vaccinated, you don't have to wear a mask. But Howard, and I'm sorry I muted you out because I was hearing you click on the keyboard. It's a very sensitive microphone. Go ahead, Howard.
Yeah, I think Yanir and I were on the same webinar, the first webinar his organization had probably last year sometime. And I think we pretty much agree on this, all of us. You know, I put a quote, I don't know if people can see the chat, but I put a quote from Joseph Goebbels, the Nazi propaganda minister, that says, if you tell a lie big enough and keep repeating it, people will eventually believe you. That's exactly what's happened. In my opinion, we are in the stage of fascism globally in most places. It takes different forms in different places. We're not totally have seen the merger of capital with every sector of government, but we're moving very quickly in that direction. And certainly that process of the complete control of every part of government by capitalism has accelerated tremendously during this 2.5 years of COVID, particularly in terms of what Fauci said. Fauci has lied, as has Walensky, the head of the CDC, the president of the United States, both Trump and Biden, purposely with intent for one reason, basically to get people back to work. In order to get people back to work, you've got to send their kids to school. So starting in between Thanksgiving and Christmas of last year, they began, and actually before then, they began to propagate these lies, and more people believe them till today. Lie number one, schools are safer than your home in terms of sending your kids. We have very few releases, and maybe Yanir knows of other ones, of contact tracing data publicly in the United States. But we do have some. And the Illinois Department of Public Health, for example, shows that anywhere from 36 to 49% of all infections, based on what the people said who were infected, happened in schools. So that's
if I can add, there are studies that show that schools contribute about 40% of transmission.
Right.
And I have some more to say about it, but why don't you go ahead?
Yeah, and I'll finish just in a minute. So another huge, in fact, one of the biggest releases of contact tracing data that was by mistake was by the state of Louisiana in July of 2020 that showed that 81% of the transmission, according to the people who got sick, happened in their workplace. So one of the major lies that's been told is that, well, you go to a bar, you go to a restaurant, or most importantly, to make you feel guilty, the transmission happens in your home. There's no doubt the transmission happens in their home, but the person who's first infected is much more likely to bring it from either the workplace or the school, which of course itself is a workplace.
Right.
Let me just finish, and then I want to hear about what you hear, and of course what you think in the audience. So let's talk about this latest lie. It became clear, and Fauci in particular, Walensky herself has no public health background, either academically or in terms of actually practicing public health. And one of the confusing things to people on purpose is that because you have a specialty in infectious disease, it makes you a public health expert. Or because you studied as an epidemiologist, it makes you a public health expert. That's absolutely not true. In the case of Walensky, we can see that she has an individual medical model perspective, which she has now thrown onto 330 million people. And so this latest lie by Fauci that the pandemic is over, but somehow it exists in the rest of the world, as Yanir explained, is a complete contradiction in the facts. And so what they've done is they've taken real facts, and one of the biggest ones is to use a picture to paint 1,000 words.
Sure.
So they decided in February that they were going to change the most fundamental principle and practice of learning how to prevent and to manage an endemic, an epidemic, an outbreak, or a pandemic, which is called community transmission, for at least 170 years, and change it and make up something called community levels, which dramatically changed how a map looks, because it takes into account, first of all, infection rates, which are are not correct. And it also throws in hospital beds and ICU beds and things like that. So right now, and I can show this later if you want, a map of the United States looks primarily green or yellow using that community level map, whereas a map of community transmission, which has its own problems because of lack of testing of those at highest risk, shows that every metropolitan area has been red or orange, particularly red, the last month. So that's just another example of the big lie.
Oh, for sure. No, that's very, very, very. I can just think about elucidating. That was really well said. Yanir, go ahead.
So let me explain a piece of what Howard said that I can add to. He talked about how you can have a lot of transmission because of schools, because of workplaces, because of home. Let's think about transmission is what we call multiplicative. It's like interest. So let's say you were to have a 40% interest on your money, and you start with just $100, right? But you have 40% interest after, I mean, depending on what time interval, but let's say in this case, after a month. So you have 40% more after a month, then you have 140. And if you wait another month, you have to multiply by 1.4, which is going to be more than 180. About 200, we could calculate it. And then it would keep going up from there. Now, the question is, how much of the money is because of the 40%? After a few months, all of it is because of the 40%.
Right.
And if you do the same thing for workplaces, so even if you have a few percent that is in some place, it will still be responsible for everything if you go wait some time, because it's just multiplying faster and faster. Yeah. So it's true that different places have different percentages of transmission. But if you don't get the transmission to be less than 1, then it's going to grow, and everything is feeding everything else. All of the transmission is feeding everything else.
Yeah, in fact, that raises. I work for the City Colleges of Chicago, and I work at Harold Washington College. And right now, a lot of the professors are remote. Some chose to go in person because their discipline was difficult to teach remotely, or there were a lot of mental health issues too, and whatnot. So we just this week we've been having about a case that's reported, and the reporting data is terrible too. They hired a private company to do the tracing. It's not actually contact tracing, right? They should be contacting or tracing how many people get infected as a result of, or family members. This week alone, just to give you an example, we went from 1 a week to 4. And I imagine that those cases are going to increase. And that's just reported cases. And these are just employees. Who knows about the students? The students don't necessarily report whether they've been infected or not. In fact, as a college professor, I've had students that have told me their entire families, fathers, mothers, siblings, aunts, uncles have COVID this semester, not last year, this semester. So I find that the response by our government and the health department has been just irresponsible and criminal. But at the same time, I also recognize that the health department is gutted. They don't have the staff to respond to this. They don't have the staff and supposedly the resources to respond for what's coming that we're seeing now. But Yanira, go ahead.
No, I mean, this is the challenge. So let me go to maybe what Howard said about the economic forces. I've actually studied quite a bit the process of economic influence. I have a paper on what's called regulatory capture, which is when businesses take over the agencies that are supposed to be regulating them. So the point is that we do have a really fundamental problem with how influence and power are present in the society. It's very obvious that that's the case. And we have a structural problem, which Howard, you called fascism, but basically it's central control. That's how I would understand it. And I've spent a few years studying the fact that central control can't deal with complex problems. That's part of the complexity science work I've done. And what I just wanted to add is that the only way that we can really solve that problem is by forming networks of teams and networks of teams. And really that's what the World Health Network is about. So our priority is to set up a system whereby people can work together to counter the pandemic, but fundamentally to counter the failure of the system to be able to act in this context, to act successfully. That's one problem. But as part of that, of course, to be able to act on behalf of people who are suffering and are going to suffer in the future.
Sure. And I'm sure we're going to have ideological differences and term differences, but I don't disagree with that. In fact, what we're seeing now is because the government has been so damn irresponsible. Who is providing these vaccine events? You know, organizations like the People's Response Network, church groups, others. And but then we have to counter the narrative that, oh, you know, you're fine. You know, the pandemic is over. You don't have to get vaccinated. So I think that well, the other fight right now too is misinformation and just and these are highly educated people, chemists, biologists, PhD, who don't want to get the booster, the next booster. They're fed up, and I'm like, how, you know, like, how can you call yourself a scientist and not get the damn booster? This disease is not the flu. You don't booster one time, you don't get a vaccine one time, you know. So I think we have a work cut out for us, and networks for sure are essential because they have to be. Like, I mean, Howard, go ahead, because I have other things to say about how this pandemic is impacting people. But you raised a quote that said TSA workers nationally have had a 50% increase in COVID since masks off. Go ahead.
Yeah, I hope that, and I'm sure he's willing, Yanir will tell us more about this team concept. I think it's quite similar to what we have been doing it for 2.5 years in the People's Response Network, which started in Chicago. We had a national presence for about 6 months, the first 6 months of the pandemic, and we would love to sit down with you, Yanir, and your team to figure out how we could work together more on a national basis. That was actually what I proposed after that session that we were both in last year. But I want to get back to what Yanir said, which is super important. Mm-hmm. One of the things that's changed, let's say, from the epidemic, it never became a pandemic for immunological reasons we don't need to talk about, was the H1n1 flu that began, and there's DNA data that confirms this, in a large CAFO, concentrated animal feeding operation that was built by the largest pork company in the world at that point, Smithfield, in 2010 in the state of Veracruz in Mexico in a rural area. Within a couple of years after that, by the way, Smithfield was bought out by one of the wealthiest Chinese capitalists who lives within the People's Republic, in quotes, of China. But I want to explain what the difference is between H1N1 and how the government under Obama handled it, and how capitalism has evolved quite quickly, to how they're handling this pandemic. In H1N1, basically, there were still some functioning public health departments, and one of the things to really discuss here is a mass confusion, I think, that even many doctors and other people, and by the way, doctors get about 1.5 to 2 hours academically teaching on public health in 4 years of medical school. So becoming a doctor means nothing about your understanding of public health. And to make it real simple, public health is population-based. It's not where you go into a medical facility. It's based on your conditions of life around you, where you live, where you work, where you go to school, where you play, and where you pray. We actually came up, this phrase came up actually in the 60s in the civil rights movement, and then was, illuminated more by the Black Panther Party and others. So those are the 5 places we say that happens. And of course, it also happens going to and from any of those places, meaning it happens if you get on a bus. It happens when you get on the train. Mm-hmm. It happens to the workers in public transit, hundreds and hundreds, probably thousands of whom have died just within the United States.
Right.
So basically what the change in this last 11 years is that Trump became the first person in the history of the United States to basically coerce every nursing home in the United States to sign a contract with either CVS or Walgreens to get the millions of people in nursing homes vaccinated by one of those two entities, the two largest pharmacies in the world, who have a total of about 21,000 pharmacies, instead of going through the local health department the way it always has been done. For example, local health departments were the primary source for providing vaccine and also going into nursing homes to vaccinate the elderly until this. But there was an opt-out to that contract that had to be signed. But that opt-out was not enforced by any state. No state took the opt-out. They all went with Walgreens and CVS. Every Democratic governor, every Republican. So the thing that's a misconception, maybe the biggest misconception by the public, is that the federal government and the CDC have.
Oh, you're freezing up, Howard.
The only powers that the CDC and the president have are some that you've seen. They can regulate interstate travel on an airplane or a train. They can shut down ports of entry, and that literally means ports, seaports. It means airports. It also means trains that could come in from Mexico or Canada. But what the CDC does all the time is issue guidelines, and that's all they are. There's no legal enforceability of those guidelines because 33 white men who wrote the Constitution, at least 27 of whom were slave owners, we don't know about the other 6 yet, basically created states' rights. And part of states' rights was to give 99% of the authority to the governors of each state, no matter whether they're blue states or red states. So then what happened, and I'll finish with this story about nursing homes, is that Biden then did two things. He did something which also had never been done in history. Not only did he say that CVS and Walgreens could vaccinate everyone in every nursing home, which the governors didn't touch, but it's the governors who made that decision. He then said that for the first time in history, since the 19th century, because vaccines started, with cholera, with smallpox and other diseases, that there were vaccines created in the 19th century or even before that, that for the first time in history, vaccines would not go just through the public health departments. And so he signed an agreement by which vaccines would go directly from the federal government through the CDC to Walgreens and CVS. They have made, between the two of them, at least $12 billion on getting about 120 million doses of the vaccine, and they've had the greatest wastage rate.
Yep.
And that vaccine has not gone directly to the people the way we always did vaccination previous to this, going to schools, going to the workplace, going out to parks, going to churches, mosques, whatever. So that's a fundamental change from the way H1n1 was handled. And there are many other aspects that basically shows the acceleration of the control of the government, by the largest capitalist corporations. But there's one other thing that we can talk about if there's time. And that is there's a new phenomenon in the last 50 years, the nonprofit industrial complex. So beside these major corporations, what's happened more at the local level, but also at the national level, is these huge nonprofit industrial complex who also want money instead of it going to rebuild public health departments.
In that vein of money, I still think there's been a lot of fiduciary responsibility when it comes to COVID funds, not just in the public school system, but in the city. And I don't, okay, I understand what's happening, but at the same time, it infuriates me that they've had billions of dollars in some and then asked for more money and still didn't have the damn foresight to send vaccination vans to the poorest communities, right? Didn't have the foresight to hire more health department workers. What has it been like in Boston? Do you think that they've done a little better with their finances there, or have they?
Unfortunately, Massachusetts is among, if you ranked Massachusetts like a country, it would be among the worst in the world for COVID response. Let me pick up the thread that Howard spoke about and articulated in a complementary language. First of all, he said that physicians are trained to deal with individual patients. And this is something that I have seen since the beginning of my involvement with pandemics, that many of the people who are appointed, even in public health positions that are trained as physicians, think about the action as being one patient at a time.
Mm.
So for them, the 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 country is a collection of individual patients that go into individual doctors' offices and get individual care. And I agree very much with Howard that this is not what public health is, but more directly relevant, this is surely not the way we can deal with pandemics.
Right.
Pandemics are contagion, infection between people in the community. And if we wait until people show up in the hospital, we've lost the
Yes.
chance that we have to take action.
Absolutely.
And this is and so this is one piece of it. The more general statement that Howard said was that public health is a community thing. It's about the community. Well, why is it about the community? Because communities are not collections of individuals. So this is one of the domains where complexity science really has a lot to say. Communities are not collections of individuals any more than a human body is a collection of individual cells.
Mm.
And we have lost the ability to understand the nature of communities. Communities have, of course, transformed over decades from what they used to be before, but it's still true that communities are not collections of individuals. And without understanding that, we don't understand what the nature is of, of health in the context of the community, and pandemics, where it's about infection in the community, a transmission between people, cannot be thought about as issues of an individual. So this is the need, why we need public health and
Mm-hmm.
why we need public health for pandemics. And the third reason that is super important is that the fact that pandemics are a community occurrence really means that the actors is the community. In other words, if you want to defeat a pandemic, the community has to decide to do something about it. It's not an individual or a few individuals that can, I mean, they can help protect themselves. That's super important. But it's really important to realize that the community has to make a decision collectively to take action in the context of a pandemic. And the reason that they would do so is because they care about
Yeah.
themselves, their families, and their communities. So, what is our role in this context? And Howard asked me to say more about the World Health Network. If it's a community action, what does an organization do? And the answer is the first and foremost role is to communicate to the community that it is the actor, that it cannot rely on the government, that it cannot rely on other entities. It has to take responsibility for its own health. So people should get together, in not necessarily physically, of course, but
Right.
communicate with each other about the need for action. And then we can, so first of all, they have to know that they're the essential actor. They're the entity that has to take action. Second of all, we have to help by providing helpful information about
Yes.
what can be done, how to stop transmission. Airborne transmission is different from other forms of transmission. People have to know what it is that you should do. And of course, there's been a lot of confusion about this, and clear information empowers people, because it's like with anything else. If you want to do something but you do the wrong thing, it's not going to help.
Right.
So you have to be empowered with the right information. And finally, there are many different pieces of what needs to be done. And some of it has to be supported by technology, by testing, by vaccination, but also by organizations that organize whatever it is, mutual aid in the community and other things. So the need for all of this organizational effort can be helped by the World Health Network, which is really, that's what it's for, to help connect different groups to each other so that they can help each other in fighting this pandemic.
But I think in here that part of the problem right first from the beginning was that instead of treating this as a communal responsibility, they turned it into an individual, my freedom, my rights, and not even just in conservative circles, even among educated people, that I'm like, well, if my religion prevents me from doing this and that. And I said, okay, well, you can have exceptions here and there, but if a majority of the people had gathered together and agreed that they were going to be vaccinated and not politicized it. I mean, that piece of shit governor, oh my God, I hate that motherfucker. The governor of Florida, who, I don't know if you saw that video where he told young people, oh, take off your mask, quit with the drama. I'm like, come on now. How dare you? How dare you be a public official and take that irresponsible, dehumanizing position? And I think that that's educating people that this is not about their individual rights, an infringement of whatever, or their children. Oh my gosh, it disgusts me that in the Chicago public school system, the Chicago Teachers Union had an agreement that children were going to remain masked until the end of the year. And they rolled that back. Why? Because parents were concerned about, their children and the psychological impact. Fuck your psychological impact. Think about the community and infection rates of other children. And it's just, it infuriates me because I'm a mother. I have small children. One is 12 and one is 7, and they still mask up. They encourage their peers to mask up. The staff and teachers have made it a high recommendation that everybody mask up, but that didn't come from the CEO Martinez of Chicago Public Schools. It didn't come from the damn mayor. It came from educated people of conscience that wanted to keep their school community safe and their family safe. So but Yanira, this, and Howard knows, this makes me so angry because what's happening now? Kids are having a higher infection rate, and it's black and brown kids. Let's call it what it is. Black and brown kids that have been suffering from systemic racism, have not have equal access to healthcare or transportation, or even these testing centers and vaccination centers. I stood in Chinatown for over an hour to get tested. By the time I made it to the place, they were out of half the tests. They had like the rapid test and then PRP test or whatever. But Howard, go ahead before I start cursing and getting angrier. What is this response to this I think a great plan that the community should see themselves as agents of change, because the government is not doing a damn thing for them. The mayor's not doing a damn thing for them. The administration is not doing a damn thing for them. Right? Go ahead.
Yeah, I don't know if it's possible.
Go
ahead, Yanira. But right before you speak, I was just wondering, technically, Jesus, is it possible to share screen at all?
Yeah, let me see. Try it out, brother. If not, you might have to email it to me.
But let's have Yanira go first.
Okay. So
I just wanted to make one comment about your statement that you're saying that people focus on the individual. And so what we end up with is this dichotomy between the individual and the government. Either the individual does it or the government does it. And neither of them are the agent. We have to think in terms of a community. I think that's really important.
I feel you, brother. No, and I uplift that. I agree with you 100%. Yeah. So Howard, we're gonna do some little tech right here, viewers. Can you see the share button and the platform you're in? It has a plus in the middle, or do you not see that?
Plus in the middle.
Or do you see mute settings, or is it maybe I'm the one that sees that?
Oh yeah, share button, right? Is that turned on? Right,
it should be turned on for everybody. Try it out, because technically you're a host. If not,
share screen.
Let's see. Yeah. I never had a guest request share, so I'm learning with you. No, I agree. One of my comrades who is a poet, he said, if we don't start seeing ourselves as protagonists in our own histories, we're going to be late to the party. And I think he's absolutely right that as community, we need to see ourselves collectively as agents of change, right? For example, in my union, there's been, oh my gosh, these people, the North Shore system is broken in terms of how it reports test results. And so somebody at the district, because we have a 2-tiered administrative system, has decided that if you don't test for five times, you get suspended. For first, you get put on unpaid leave for the safety of the community. Then you go through a pre-disciplinary hearing. Then you get suspended without pay. So I have part-time security officers, part-time employees, full-time members in other unions, other sectors in the union that are without pay for over a month, right? And but I think it's hypocrisy, because if it had been really a question about healthcare, they would have pulled that member aside after the first time and said, "Hey, listen, you need to test every week, or you need to upload your vaccination card, or hey, you're misinformed about what full vaccination means. You need to have the 2 shots and the booster." But the policies have been miscommunicated so poorly that now we have people that are being suspended, and it's ridiculous, you know. So go ahead, Howard.
Yeah, I think what would be really helpful is if we can get consensus, not necessarily today. It's not a matter of miscommunication. It's a matter of false information being intentionally communicated, right? So it's a matter of semantics. But let me give you an example. We had a large solidarity movement in Chicago because Chicago is home to the greatest number of different Native American tribes of any urban area in the country. And so we had a big solidarity movement with Standing Rock. At one of the meetings, someone who was Native American got up, actually one of the facilitators, and said, "I wish the Army Corps of Engineers would do their job." After he sat down, several people got up, including myself, and said, "The Army Corps of Engineers is doing their job."
Did you freeze up? Oh, he froze up. Oh, well, that'll be in just a short pause. I'm sorry. I'm actually out of town taking a wellness weekend because I need to grade papers, and the Wi-Fi here is a little bit sketchy.
Their job is as a colonial.
Howard, you're freezing up a lot, brother. Maybe chat out in the comments until you come back. But
yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. We left you at
Okay,
what is the responsibility? You said they were doing their job,
The
and that's
Army Corps is doing their job.
yeah. The Army Corps is
so
doing
the
their
U.S. Army Corps job, engineers was doing their job as a colonial imperial, military arm, of the government. So I want to just though segue with what Yanir said about this team concept. I'm going to try to do this share screen so you can just see a minute about the people's response. Let's see, window. Let's see if this works.
It should work.
Okay. Well, anyway, the People's Response Network basically has a concept that we've been implementing called dual power. This original essay, was written in April of 1917 by Vladimir Lenin, the leader of the Bolshevik Revolution, and also certainly implemented and propagated by Leon Trotsky. And the idea here is really simple. At that point, the Bolsheviks really had no control over any of the Soviets. They were kind of floundering around, and Kerensky and bourgeois democracy had taken over the government from the Tsar. But the Bolsheviks knew that they were not going to succeed in doing anything to help the masses. So the idea of dual power, which we're not at that point yet in the United States, but the concept needs to start being implemented, is that you do 2 things. Number one, you organize what the Black Panther Party and the Young Lords called community survival programs pending revolution. Meaning the kind of stuff I think Yanir is referring to that we've done is we've had over a dozen events for COVID testing, COVID vaccines, distribution of masks, et cetera, et cetera. We had our most recent one 13 days ago in the neighborhood that has the most deaths of any zip code in Illinois and one of the 10 highest zip codes in the United States. 350 people have died in one zip code. They primarily Mexican Americans and African Americans. So that's one part of that. That is somewhat different than what 90% plus of what people did at the beginning of COVID with the mass distribution of food and everything. All that is necessary, but it wasn't done from the perspective of building power in the communities or building power in the workplace, like we have seen with the Amazon workers and Chris Small and the other 14 organizers. Building power means that everyone can make a contribution to doing this. No matter what your physical, emotional state is, you can make a contribution. So that's one part of dual power. The other part of dual power is to put revolutionary demands on the government, local, state, and
Absolutely.
federal government. And you have to continually do both of those things at the same time while you are doing what's commonly known as base building. You have to both reach out to existing organizations. That's why we are proposing a meeting, with the World Health Network and People's Response Network, but you also have to spend probably the majority of your time reaching out to new people you don't know.
For
So
sure.
we have gone 45 times to different schools around Chicago based on the neighborhoods where our members live. We have handed out flyers, talked with parents, et cetera, et cetera. We've gone to some workplaces, some Amazon warehouses, the same thing. So that's the basic concept that we believe we have to continue to develop, and we have no choice, because as bad as the pandemic is,
Right.
and this pandemic is continuing to evolve. We probably don't have time to talk about all the new subvariants or variants that are happening both in the US and around the world. But we know that climate change disasters can happen. And I'm just going to give you two examples of climate change disasters, and the fact that the government is completely unprepared, again on purpose, and tells people on its website, this is at FEMA.gov, to go to Walmart and spend about $150 to prepare for the next tornado or flood. So there's two important scientific documents that have been published in the last year. In May of 2021, there was probably the most important article I've seen since I started working and understanding climate change in 1965. And that is what's going to happen when there's a heat wave and the grid completely goes out. So it looked at three cities, Atlanta, Detroit, and Phoenix. And basically within 3 days, anywhere from 81 to 100% of all people got heat stroke. Because when the electricity goes out, it's not just the AC that goes out, it's the water. Potable water cannot be purified or pumped in any city without electricity. So that's number one. This week, there's another peer-reviewed article that says, what's going to happen if a tornado and a flood are coming at the same time? So a lot of times tornadoes precede floods, but in terms of the emergency warning system, which is incredibly primitive in the United States, it's going to tell people there's a tornado coming, go to your basement. Oh, wait, there's a flood coming, go to the second floor. So that's what's coming down, and it's only through dual power that we are going to begin to build power in a revolutionary way to take over the government.
Yeah, and I agree 100%. I mean, that we definitely need to keep making demands, and I think base building is critical. I just wanted to uplift this. One of the things I've done, I'm trying to get other chapter chairs, which are like the stewards. We all have a college that we represent. Is that we've had to do a mutual aid fund, and I think these are the expressions, right? That we have to do vaccination events. We have to support each other, but keep demanding, and not and just because fucking Fauci is saying the pandemic is over, our work is not over. In fact, we should double our efforts because we have to counter so many lies, so much, like you say, misinformation by design, deceit by design. That I think our work is cut out for us. And hermanos, I usually go for 45 minutes. I should have said that before. It's been a sincere pleasure to have you, Howard, and you're here. This is not the end. I hope to continue to do this at least once a week. I would do it more if I could, but I got a full-time job and I'm in the middle of a contract campaign. But the other thing I wanted to promote is that tomorrow, as you know, another aspect of the fantastic world of fascism in America is that they are attacking women's reproductive rights. And so I'm going to have a show at 4 o'clock Central Time to talk about abortion rights and motherhood. It is Mother's Day in America. And to talk about what it means to have chosen mothers instead of the mothers we grew up with. So it's going to be a combo. We usually interweave some poetry with our shows, but just let's leave it on Munir. Maybe since Howard had some wonderful solutions, what would you tell our viewers to begin to consider or to struggle? And you've talked about communities and these networks, but maybe even tell them where they can find the World Health Network. And Howard, if you could tell them where to find the People's Response Network, that would be a great place to start. Go ahead, Yanir.
I think one of the most important things is that we are constantly being told that the people who care about action in the context of the pandemic are the minority. And this is a press narrative. And There are many people who we talk to who say, well, I'm the only one. You know, they look around, they say, I don't, but what they're really doing is they're looking through the eyes of the press, because the press keeps telling everybody. When they do actual polls, it's 70-80% of people, even under these circumstances, want to do more about the pandemic. So it's really important for us to discover each other. We've put together a website called COVID Meetups. It's very simple. It just lets you sign up and see who else is around you that would like to help each other being safe, to be able to interact with each other during the pandemic in a safe way. It doesn't mean necessarily getting together physically, but it provides the opportunity of discussing with others whether or not to get together in a safe way. Regardless, it's very easy to sign up, and now there's just added a group chat. It already has, I think the last count is about 2,500 members globally, but obviously that's just the beginning. So welcome everyone to sign up and to let everyone else know about the covidmeetups.com website, so that we can create just visibility, and we'll be able to talk to each other and work together on stopping this terrible pandemic.
Hey, so it's called COVID Meetups?
COVID Meetups.
Oh, I put an extra E. I'm trying to find it so I can display it and also share it in the yeah, you sent me that I'm so dumb. You sent me that website, and I didn't realize the political significance of it until you explained it to me right now. So COVID Meetups, please check it out and see what we can do to network with other people. Hopefully we'll find some other allies to come into our work. Howard, do you want to maybe leave them with a parting shot and talk about how they can join the PRN?
Sure. I think that's a fantastic idea. I didn't even know about that, Yanir. So thank you so much for you and your organization developing it. I just went on the website and I'm going to sign up as soon as we're done. I think there's lots of ways that not just World Health Network and People's Response Network can begin to meet and work together, but lots of other people and organizations.
Absolutely.
We have weekly meetings every Wednesday at 6 p.m. Central Time. And we basically would be happy to have anybody in those meetings. We have people from New York sometimes. We have people from California. We have people from a lot of places. And if you go to our Facebook page, which is just People's Response Network, you can find out how to sign up for those meetings. If you want to email us, our email, which I'm not the main person who supervises that email, is literally just PRN Coalition. So PRN and Coalition, no dots, at gmail.com. We welcome all individuals, and all organizations who want to work together in the kind of ways that Yanir, Jesus, and myself have been talking about. So thank you.
Right. Thank you, brothers. Hey, listen, this is just the first. I hope to see you again, if not in a weekly, every other week. But this has been amazing. So think of this as your second home, Howard, and you're welcome back anytime. Appreciate you to the max. Have a great day. If you like the show, please like and subscribe. Please help spread the word, and most definitely share out, because people need to be informed and they need to be empowered to fight. Oops.